Bismillah, walhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. SubhanAllah, I question our patterns of thinking and the state of logistics that we have sometimes as a community with regard to managing issues. I remember reading in the fiqh of Islam a debate among the ulama with regard to the issue of the rights of the traveler, whether the traveler has a right to stay in the masjid or not. We find that type of debate amongst the scholars of fiqh. So even actually the debate goes back to not necessarily the masjid, but the rights of the traveler with regard to whether they have a right over you or not. And so the issue is that we know that in Islam, the traveler has rights. The traveler even has the right of zakah. So some of the scholars debated that the traveler becomes a guest and has the right at least of 3 days to stay with you. And then above that, there has to be some sort of discussion. Imam Malik, rahimahullah, he was of the opinion that in some places like the city, that the person, would go to something like we would call a hotel. So I look at the fiqh in that regard without going into a lot of details, given that, we have real world situations. So this morning, one of the community members, and I posted this in another live, and alhamdulillah, based on that live, some people have contacted me to try to send some support. But a sister was dealing with a domestic issue. And actually, I just found out that her husband didn't even want her to put on hijab. So part of that was the issue. I'm not even going to go into the other details, or even go into a lot of research. You find the sister that's vulnerable with autistic children, 5 girls. I don't understand what is in our minds for a masjid to see that type of situation and tell a sister go to a shelter. That means that they don't have any consciousness of what goes on in a shelter. You're sending a sister in her vulnerability state or state of vulnerability with 5 girls, and in that group of 5 girls, there's children with autism. And she's already in the situation in which she's distraught because actually she's on her way to she's on her way to her family, but she had anxiety and she was supposed to fly and didn't fly because she has anxiety. So she decided to take a bus, and it just so happened that she wasn't able to make her way all the way to the final destination, and her trip was delayed till Friday. And so when we start talking about the application of the fiqh in our lives, there's a basis for giving the traveler zakah. If we're scared that someone is going to get over on us for $100 or $200 or even $500, and where you can actually go to a hotel, pay for the stay of the person, get the receipt yourself. What's the fear in that? What does it cost us to look into the situation of another Muslim or human being in general and come to their aid? Is that not from the qualities of Iman? Are there not these types of discussions on the right of the traveler, the right of the guest, the right of the Muslim in distress? Don't we have, a system of rights in Islam which deals with these issues? So I'm wondering, have we lost our minds when we start talking about practicing the deen? It's bad enough. And then, the situation gets even more complicated when we start listening to situations, to aspects of this situation which become manifest, that sister is put on the street because she wants to in part practice Islam and the husband doesn't, and she ends up in the street with the children. She's thrown out. it's just like not I just don't understand where our minds are at, when it comes to dealing with the situations of the community. How can we ever talk about really building community or the rights of another Muslim when that's our condition? And this is not the only case. It's not the only case. If you talk to people that work in the shelter situation with the Muslim shelters, they will tell you the exact stories of what happens and how people end up in these situations. And, in some states, if you don't pay your rent on time, you have 5 days and they start the evacuation process, so to speak, the eviction. And so, it's easy for many people to land up in homelessness and be in situations of vulnerability. But what makes it worse is that the sister is saying, I'm in a situation which is abusive. I can't even practice Islam. And my own Muslim husband is the one that's putting me on the street. And so if you can't go to the masjid, if you can't go to the Muslims, who do you turn to? And twice this week, sisters have told me, I'd rather just go to the church. And that's not the first time that I've heard that. I'd rather just go to the church. The church will give me more assistance. What do you say? What do you say to that type of stuff? What do you say when the masjid is turning away people with vulnerability? That's the bottom line. I know that in one masjid, and I know that people sometimes they commit fraud and they do that type of stuff. But there's easy ways. If you take enough time to look into the situation, there's an easy enough way to determine what's going on. That's the bottom line. We have to want to service the community. We have to want to put things in place. Alhamdulillah that people stepped up. And I thank those who stepped up with, offering assistance. And actually, they contacted the sister themselves. A couple stepped up and they contacted the sister herself. They didn't want to deal with any intermediaries. And the sister is known who she is in the community. So in any event, we have to regain our minds. What is influencing our decision-making process and handling issues? Like I said, there's some precedent in the fiqh of Islam, the rights of the traveler, the rights of the guest. The least that we could do in those types of situations, if we don't want the person to stay in the masjid, or if we don't want the person to stay in our home, the least, is to assist in getting them a hotel. After all, that's what the collection of sadaqah and zakat is for. Remember that in Islam, we had Bayt al-Mal. We had a Bayt al-Mal. So a community that doesn't understand those fundamentals in Islam, as far as leadership is concerned, your leadership comes into question. Whether you're even in the capacity to deal with where the Muslims are at. Because this is exactly the situations that the Muslims are dealing with. Majority of the people don't interest themselves in that because they're focused on making sure that themselves and their families are okay until these types of crises hit them. And by the way, it hits the people in the suburbs with the nice cars and nice homes and nice bank accounts. When that crisis hits, it doesn't discriminate. And it hits the people that are impoverished. And we've seen that. We've seen situations in which sisters that are in these situations of wealth and stability, where it can go from one state to another state almost overnight, almost immediately. And they have no one to turn to. You know what I'm saying? And their wealth doesn't shield them from the reality of the situation. We've seen the same thing with brothers. It can easily happen. So we have to guide our decisions. We have to orient our mind and regather our minds. And we have to guide our decisions by the values of Islam. We don't have to be perfect, but in our decision making, when it comes to other people, we're obligated. We're obligated to decide things according to Islam, not according to what we want, not according to what we, are motivated to by our desire, but according to the rights that we owe people Islamically. Or else what we have done to our Islamic identity is we have collapsed it. We have collapsed that identity, and what's left is a thin line connecting us between Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala and ourselves. But Islam is not just about our relationship directly with Allah wa ta'ala. Islam is about our relationship with Allah wa ta'ala, and our relationship with ourselves and our relationships with others. There's no such thing as it's just what goes on in your heart and between you and Allah, and that's it. That's why Islam, it legislates certain types of activities. And amongst those activities that it legislates is upholding the rights of others, whether Muslim or non-Muslim. And so I thought that the Muslim had rights upon other Muslims. There's easy ways if you're scared to lose money. There's easy ways in today's time to be able to determine issues. There's easy ways to be able to support people, without having to fear that someone is cheating you. And at the end of the day, if someone reaches that level where they're trying to, you think even if someone were to take $1,000 from the community, even if they were to travel the country and they would hit 12 masjids like that, you think $12,000 is enough to survive for the year? That's the reality at the end of the day. There is the support mechanism for many people is broken, and so people are in desperate situations, and so at the end of the day, and like I said before, and I want to cut this short, if the non-Muslims are the ones that are taking up the slack for the Muslim community, and that's beginning to be the case in social services, especially, and then in safety net provision, what's the purpose of community? Just close it down. Let's just rent a place for Jummah. Let's if we're gonna be about money, let's be about money. It's cheaper to have a place. It's cheaper to rent a place for Jummah. Close down the expenses of having a masjid. We celebrate Jummah once a week. Forget about the masjid at this point. Let's not even attempt to have a community. You just pray wherever you want to pray. I know that that's an exaggeration. Some people may see that as being a problematic statement. But what I'm saying is that, what is the function of the masjid and what is the function of people that are taking sadaqah and zakat from the community at this point? Because there's no service going back to the community on many fronts. You know what I'm saying? And so, for instance, sadaqah and zakat, a portion of that is supposed to be designated to go back right into the community, into services. It just can't be that the majority of that is just going into maintaining buildings. That becomes extremely problematic. And so it's tragic to see that. It's tragic to see that, when these situations arise, we're not even using the fiqh of Islam or even basic knowledge. You know what I'm saying? Or there's not even a basic human instinct, as far as wanting to help the person. What stops us from investigating and kind of inserting ourselves into these situations and then saying, I'm sorry, you're on your own after this, but we're not even investigating. We're not even, making sure that the situation is what it is. We're just sending people off on their own. And we're not even considering mental conditions or the station of youth and so on and so forth, and the safety of people. That causes me to question. It's like, honestly, when I tally up all of these things, and I'm going to finish on this note, I question what will be the survival of Islam in the generations to come if that's the ethic that we have developed. Because not even the churches function on that ethic. The churches will have services that they provide or something that they provide, to people, or some ways of connecting people with services outside of already the government services. And all of those services, by the way, are overburdened because of the rising poverty rate. Some of you may be happy because you have stocks and you have 6-figure salaries and you have nice bank accounts and this and that. But in the meantime, while there's a portion of the society that's at that level and above that, maybe into the millionaire realm, there's a larger portion of the society which is struggling with poverty, or struggling with just maintaining. And so the poor won't leave our side in that regard, right? And so, but there's nothing being done except saying, well, that's on you, and if it comes and it hits you, because no one is guaranteed safety in their wealth. If that comes to be your situation, and if the people come and they say, well, that's on you, don't be mad. Don't make it a situation in which it at that point in time you question where humanity is at, because we should have questioned ourselves a long time ago with regard to the state and the station of Muslims and humanity in general, so that we can be people that are working to better the situation. What's the whole purpose of talking about good deeds if good deeds are only at our convenience? It's only if it doesn't hurt us, only if it doesn't affect, then I'll engage in some good. How do we counter our sins and bring about good deeds if on our part everything seems to be burdensome? You know what I'm saying? That any good deed that we're asked to do that makes us uncomfortable is so burdensome that we can't do it because it inconveniences us. So that's not from the character of the Muslim. And we have to regain our minds and ask us, what is Islam demanding of us in these situations? If we want to change our condition, if not, if we just want everything to be as it is and we don't care about the future of Islam, we don't care about any good deeds, we don't have any empathy for humanity, then continue as is. But don't call that Islam. Don't call that Islam, and don't identify yourself as a Muslim in that case. Keep your commitment and your shahada private, because if you identify as a Muslim, then there's certain mutatallabat, there's certain things which are required of us in terms of our relationships with each other. And we end on that note that we should be bold about our Islam, that we're about certain things, and we should be bold about striving against ourselves and doing good deeds, because we have to do that in order to overcome ourselves and achieve some sort of station with Allah Ta'ala to keep ourselves safe from the hellfire. And a lot of us, we're struggling with that. How can we find the space? How can we carve a road to Jannah? Well, this is how you do it. You have to think about others in the community. You have to think about good deeds. Good deeds is not just you making dhikr by yourself. That's part of it, but that's not the whole thing. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.